Hello everyone, today we're going to be building a Raycast extension. If you haven't heard of Raycast, it's an app for the Mac, a lot like Spotlight, that you can use to search for files across your Mac or quickly open apps. My favorite feature is their support for extensions that allows you to integrate with third-party apps and services. In this video, we're going to cover what it takes to get started building an extension, whether that's for your own personal usage or if you eventually want to publish it to their Raycast store. Before we get started, we want to make sure you have the right requirements on your system. That is, you will need a Mac. As far as I know, the app only works for Mac at the moment. You're going to need Node.js 16.10 or higher, NPM 7.0 or higher, some familiarity with TypeScript and React, and the last thing is you're going to want to go to raycast.com and sign up for an account with them. You're going to need that to get started. Once you have Raycast downloaded and installed on your computer, you're going to open it up and type in store. Once you run this command for the first time, it's going to prompt you to sign in. I've already done that on my machine. Go ahead and fill out your sign-in details. And once you're signed in, you're going to go ahead and go back to the main menu and type create extension. At this point, it's going to prompt you to fill out some basic information about the extension you want to create. For my title, I'm going to call this Wistia because the extension I want to create is to search through my Wistia videos. I'll just fill out some information here. Choose a directory that you want to save this in. I'm going to go ahead and start off with the blank template. This, for my command name, I'm going to call this search medias. Now I'll hit create, and that's it. Our extension is created. So the next thing I'm going to do is go to that directory where it created it and open that up in VS Code. Okay, now that we've created the directory for our extension, let's go ahead and do a quick walkthrough of what we have. The first thing you'll notice is we have a package.json file. In here we have some basic information that was inserted from the form we just submitted on the Raycast side. So we have a name for our package, title and description, author. One thing we'll note here is the command we created. If we had created multiple commands from the beginning, this would be filled out with more commands here. We have the name, search medias with the title. The description is blank because we didn't provide any. And they've gone ahead and added both the Raycast API as a dependency, which we're going to need, and then a bunch of dev dependencies to start out our developer environment. So now that we have our package.json file, the next thing we want to do is open up a terminal window, and we're going to want to run npm install to get all of our dependencies and dev dependencies installed on our computer. Okay, so now that we have our packages installed, let's go ahead and close our terminal window. And we'll notice that for our command name here, it's search-medias. And the reason is that's actually referencing the source file. So we have a source folder, search-medias.tsx, and this was auto-generated for us based on the command name. And you'll notice it's blank right now. One thing I'm going to do now is open up our terminal window again, and we're going to run npm run dev. And that's going to go ahead and load up our extension that we're developing into Raycast. So if we open up Raycast, you'll notice that we have this top command called search medias, which is what's running locally on my machine. If we hit enter, we'll notice that nothing happens because we haven't added anything yet. So let's close out of this and let's go back into our file, and we're just going to add something basic just so we can see that it's working. The way that Raycast commands work in development is it expects you to return a React component, and it's going to render that React component once we click into our command. So the React component that we're going to want here is going to be, we're going to start out with a detail component, and that's going to come from the Raycast API. And now we're going to export default function. This will be our React component. We can just call this search medias. And then this is going to return this detail component that's coming from Raycast. And what the detail component does is just render some markdown. So we'll pass it a markdown prop. And here we'll just say hello world to see that it's working. And that's it. When we go back into our command, we can see hello world rendered inside of our search medias command. So now we have our command set up in development mode and we have it rendering something to the UI. We're going to want to get started on what we actually want to build, which is searching through our Wistia medias. So we're going to do some data fetching, and we're going to do that data fetching the way you normally would in a React app. Now I've gone ahead and worked on the data fetching side. I'm going to put that in its own file since it's not super specific to Raycast itself, but I will go over and highlight some details that you want to keep in mind if you're going to be performing any data fetching in your extension. So I'm going to create a new file here called api.ts, and then I'm going to create another file called types.ts. So I've already worked on some types that I'm going to need for my extension, and we'll add these in here. These are just some TypeScript interfaces that I'm going to need as I build out my extension. And then on the API side, we'll fill that out here. One thing to note here about the data fetching is that this is happening in a Node environment. And for my extension, I wanted to use the fetch API that I'm familiar with. So I'm going to go ahead and install Node Fetch. And now here in our API file, you'll notice we have some data fetching happening using the fetch API. The one thing to note though is that if your app needs an API token, typically in a Node app you would put that somewhere in like a .env file. You don't want to hard code that into your app. But here in the Raycast extension environment, we don't have access to .env. So what we are going to use is this API they provide called getPreferences value. Now this is a preference value that's stored within Raycast themselves, and I'm going to show you how we set that up. So if we go back into our package.json file, down here we're going to add a new key called preferences. So this is a way to allow users to input preference values into your extension. This one is special in particular because we're giving it this required flag. And this tells Raycast that the user needs to fill out this preference before they're able to continue using the extension. So you give it a name. This is how you'll reference it when you go to use it in your app. You give it a title and a description. This is what's going to be surfaced to the user when they're filling it out. And then we denote it as typed password because we want it to be obscured when they're typing it in the input field. So now you'll notice when I start up Raycast and hit enter on our command, it's going to say, hey, we noticed that this extension has a required preference value. Go ahead and fill this in to move forward. For the time being, I'm just going to hit something random. You'll notice that there's no validation here. It just requires it to be present, and we're able to move forward back into our extension. So now if we head back to our API file, you'll notice I imported this get preference value from the Raycast API. I've defined it here up top as, hey, we need this preferences object, and then we can get preferences.wistia API token, which is how we named it in the package.json file. So now if we want to test out really quick and see what this is printing out, I'm going to copy this into our command. I'm going to import get preferences. And then when we run this right now, I'm just going to log it out just to make sure that's working. So I'm going to clear out my terminal, run my command again, and you'll notice we have password ABC123, which is what I typed in for now. So we have our preferences set up. We know that's working. Go ahead and remove this because I don't need this anymore. Now that we have the methods that we need to make our API call, we're going to go ahead and set that up the way we would in a React component. For me, that's going to be setting that up in a use effect call. And let's go ahead and do that now. So we'll add in a use effect here up top. and we'll give this a blank dependency array so that it only runs once. And now I'm going to define a function within my useEffect call, and we'll call these medias fetch medias, and that's going to automatically import that from our API file. And then we're going to want to store that somewhere. So I'm going to set up some useState. So we're going to import Wistia media, again, from the types that I had already set up in our types file. And then last, we need to import useState, and we'll wrap this in try catch for now. And then once we have those medias, we're going to set that on our state. And just so that we know this is working, I'm going to log this to the console. And now we will run that fetch data method. So let's go ahead and clear out the terminal and rerun this command. Search medias, we're still printing hello world for now, but we can see in the back that we have an unauthorized credentials error because we don't have a proper API token yet. But before I input the proper API token for our app here, I'm going to go ahead and add some error handling to capture this specific use case and show error message to the user that's more useful than just, hey, this didn't work. So we know that there's an error code that says unauthorized credentials. So we're going to check for that. So if we reach this error, we're going to want to show a toast. And that's actually coming from the Raycast API. The first parameter is a toast style. So we'll say toast style dot failure. We'll say invalid API token. And here we'll just say check your API token and try again. Else, we'll just say something went wrong. So if we detect that their credentials are invalid, we'll tell them that. If something else goes wrong, we're just going to bail out with a generic error message. So now we have a TypeScript problem here, and it's complaining because we don't know what object this is. So we're going to import Wistia API error, which is a type I've already defined. And we're just going to cast this as Wistia API error. So let's go ahead and run our command again and now see what happens. So we can see at the bottom, we get our toast showing, hey, this is invalid API token. We still get this awkward experience where it stays on the screen after it fails. And so we're going to reset the state of our extension and go back to the main screen. And the way we do that is using another method that is imported from the Raycast API. That's called pop to root. And so we'll run that here. Now, when we search our medias, we go back to the main menu if we get an invalid API token. Now I'm going to go ahead and input the proper API token. I'll show you where you can go ahead and do that. You're going to open up Raycast, then press Command, comma to open up the Raycast preferences. From here we go to extensions. We're going to search for the extension we just created. And here you see the input field for the Wistia API token. So I'm going to go ahead and put the proper token here, and then we can move on. Okay, so now we have the proper API token saved inside the Raycast preferences. Let's go ahead and rerun this command and see if we get any data back. So I'm going to open up our terminal, clear that out again, hit enter on search media, and you'll see that we're getting some data back. So now that we have that, it's saved onto our state, we can go ahead and start listing this out to display. And Raycast makes it super easy to do this. We're going to use their list component that they provide, and that's going to give us a native look and feel of Raycast. Let's remove detail, replace that with list, and replace that with the list component here. And then inside, we're going to loop over all of our media objects and then use List.Item to render those out individually. We can see that GitHub Copilot is helping me out here, which is exactly what we want to do. Medias.map, then loop over each list item. We're going to use the media ID as the key, media.name as the title, and we're going to remove a description here because we don't need that. And then we'll close this out. And now we should be good to go. Actually, there you go. Once I reopened the command, it auto refreshed and we have our media. Let's go back to the home screen so we can see that again. We run our search media command and there you have it. So we saw some weird flashing there at the beginning. It starts out with no results and then it gets populated. That is a bit of an awkward experience, but we have a loading flag that we can pass into our list so that it shows something before showing no results. So we're going to create a new state variable here and we're going to call that loading, and we're going to start out with true. And then here up top, we're going to set loading to true. And then we're going to set loading to false. And then if we hit an error, we're going to also set loading to false. Now this is a pretty basic way to set up loading. There are far more robust ways to set this up, but just for the purposes of the demonstration here, this should be enough. So over in our list, we're going to use our isLoading prop. We're going to pass the loading key. And now if we rerun our command, we should see that we get a little loading bar up top before showing our results. So now that we have our list displayed, we just want to make it look a little better. And there are some props on List.Item that we can pass in that'll make this look just a little cleaner visually. So one of the first things I want to do here is display the video duration along with the video title. And I created a function here that's going to give us some formatting for the duration that comes back in seconds. And here we're going to use another property called accessory title. But here we're going to pass in, we're going to use this friendly duration function that we created, and we're going to pass in media.duration. And now if we rerun our command, we'll see on the right hand side, we get all the duration of each one of these media objects. So this is a cool spot to put in additional info about any of the things that you're displaying. Now there's an additional property called accessory icon. Here we're going to check if our media type is video, and if it is, we're going to show an icon called video-16, which Raycast provides, and if not, then we're just going to show nothing for now. So we'll see here that all of these in my project are video files. So we get this nice looking video icon. Now I don't have any audio files to display, but let's say I did. We can also toss in just an emoji here. So I'm going to use this little sound looking icon, and we'll see when we run our command again, we can also display emojis inside of these list items. So I'm going to keep that just in case I have any audio files pop up, and I'm going to default back to video 16 because I like the look of that one for our media items. Now the next thing we're going to do is we can add in an icon as well. And I want to display the thumbnails for these videos inside of these list items. And Raycast provides a way to do that. So in here, I'll pass in an object. Say the source is media.thumbnail.url. And I also want to provide a mask. There's several different masks that you can provide out of the box from Raycast. We'll use this object called image mask, which gets imported from the Raycast API. And I want to use a rounded rectangle. So now, if all things go well, you can see on the left-hand side, we're using the thumbnails for each one of these video files. Now, the last thing I want to do is you can provide an array of keywords to each list item. And this is if you want to have additional information that you want to display that allows us to search for that item. So in this case, we're going to pass it an array, and we're going to use the media hashed ID as a keyword that will allow us to search for this item. So that can be another useful thing to use to search and narrow down this list. Now, the last thing, just to make this list a little bit more useful, is you want to have some actions associated with each list item. So what's going to happen when I click or hit enter on each one of these list items? Well, we can go ahead and add that by adding actions, and this accepts a component. That component will be an action panel. And inside of this action panel, I have to import this really quick from Raycast API. Inside of this action panel, we can provide some list of actions, the same way we're providing list items to the list component. And you can provide a default action that gives you an on-click handler, but there's also a bunch of actions that you get out of the box from Raycast. So one of the most basic ones is a copy to clipboard action, and that is just called copy to clipboard action. We get some autocomplete here, again imported from Raycast API, and you pass it a content prop. For right now, let's go ahead and copy the media name. So we'll go back to our command, search medias. Let's say I want to copy this one here. I hit enter. We get the little toast message that says it's copied to clipboard, and we can paste it right here. You'll notice that by just adding one action, it defaults to it when you hit enter. And so if I add another one here, let's say I want to add another one where we copy the hashed ID. Now when I go back to my list, my default action is still to copy the name, but if I go down here and I click more actions, you'll see we have two copy to clipboards. One is mapped to the enter key and the other one is mapped to command enter. So the second one is the next one we've added, the copy hashed ID. And we know that worked now because if I go back to my list and I paste, you'll notice I've pasted the hashed ID. And because I added that as a keyword to the list item, we're now filtering the list using the hashed ID. So I'll go ahead and remove that. Now it's not really helpful that they both have the same name, copy to clipboard. So we're gonna go ahead and give this a title. And we'll say copy name to clipboard. And here we'll add another one, copy hashed ID to clipboard. And now if I open these up and I open the more actions menu, we'll notice we have copy name and copy hashed ID. And then the last thing I want to do, which is like the most useful one, is I want to open these videos inside of a browser window. So to do that, we're going to use a new action called open in browser action. Again, this gets imported from Raycast. And now we need to give this a URL. Now I don't have everything I need to build this URL yet. I actually need the base URL before I can complete this. And to do that, I actually need one more bit of state from my API. So we're gonna fetch account info, and this is gonna be account info. Again, that's another type that I've already added to my types file. And now in our use effect, I'm going to change this line that's just fetching our medias to fetch both our media and our account info. So I'm going to convert this to a promise.all. And then I'm also going to fetch account info. Now this method is also imported from our API file. And then here we'll destructure the response and set account info. So now I should have that here at the bottom, and we'll say account info account.info.url/medias/hashed ID. And that should give us the URL we need to open this in the browser. We just have one quick problem here. There's a possibility that account info is undefined. Go ahead and conditionally render this here. Say if account info exists, then go ahead and show this open in browser action. So now I can search my medias. We see we have open in browser. It's taken the place of the return key as a shortcut. Now copy name is command enter. And then our last command does not have a keyboard shortcut. Again, you can assign one to that if you want. So now let's go ahead and I want to open this video. Boom. And so we have our video. I want to open just this other video. We can see it's all set up and it's working for us. Okay. And just like that, we've learned how to set up a Raycast extension. We've fetched some data, we've rendered it in a list, and we've added some actions to those list items, along with some keyboard shortcuts, and given each one of those list items some additional information rendered in that list. I think that's a good stopping point for today's video. In the next video, we'll walk through how to set this up for publishing to the Raycast store. That way other people can install it and use your extension. But for now, you can go ahead and stop the build command on your computer and you should still have access to this extension and you can go ahead and keep using it. I hope you found this video useful and you are inspired to go out and create your own extensions that will supercharge your workflow and make you more productive with Raycast. I will catch you in the next video.